Okay, so a lot of times people spend time working on their internal rotation or the ability to rotate your hip in this way. And they start right away in 90-90 position. And what happens is when you don't have good internal rotation of that back leg, 90-90 isn't going to look straight. It's going to look tilted. And so there's nothing wrong. You can still do work down here on your elbow, but it's trying to put yourself into a position that you don't quite own yet. Like you might feel a big difference in your 90-90 between the two different sides. I know I do. And so for internal rotation, a lot of times, if you have trouble feeling that stretchy feel, what you're supposed to feel, like as your hip capsule winds, and that's where you're trying to stretch all those muscles that kind of feed into that posterior hip capsule. And as you take it into internal rotation, you should feel a really intense stretching feeling, but it shouldn't ever feel like a pinch that you have to just kind of gut through. So how do we train internal rotation? Well, there's lots of other ways. Bear is another great position. However, a lot of times, like for me, I don't do any internal rotation training in bear because I feel a pinch almost immediately. So I've been working on, get my little pillow here. So I've been working on laying on my back. So our first active health breakdown featured PAILs and RAILs from the supine figure 4 position. This is so comfortable. You just bring your leg up here and you can do a lot of work on this hip. Now, if I want to work on this hip into internal rotation, so I can leave it here, I can rotate in just a little bit, take my other leg and place it right across, and then allow the weight of my leg to pull this left leg. It's pulling it down, and I'm feeling a really good, deep stretch. And it's a stretch, it's not a pinch. Bam, perfect. Hold. Just hold. And so now from here, we're trying not to let our body rotate too far this way. And now I'm arching my low back, and now I can start feeling some undesirable feelings in my low back. So you want to bring it back down. You want to keep your back flat. You want to keep your pelvis kind of glued to the floor. And you just want to let your ball and socket rotate internally so that you feel a stretch and you don't feel a pinch. And then from here, we can absolutely hit multiple and successive rounds of PAILs and RAILs training. So I would hold this position for 2 minutes, just feeling this really good stretch. And then after 2 minutes, my PAILs contraction would be trying to push this left leg up, so trying to externally rotate open, but not letting that happen by simultaneously driving down with this leg through my calf. So my top leg is kind of driving it down this way, and my bottom leg is pushing up. And I slowly ramp up how hard I'm doing that. And then once I get to that working percentage, whatever that may be for you, we're going to hold, but we're not letting it go too far so this back comes off. Let's keep that back nice and flat. There we go. Hold that PAILs contraction for about 10, 15 seconds, sometimes longer. And then we're going to immediately go straight into RAILs. And RAILs, I'm trying to rotate this leg that I'm training even farther down into internal rotation, okay? But I'm also allowing the weight of this leg to kind of ride me down into that position a little bit easier. So it's like the weight of my leg plus me actively trying to rotate. I really feel a good feeling in this left hip going into internal rotation. Then I would hold that RAILs for about another 15 seconds, relax, maybe put more of my leg over. Right, so this top leg also works as a lever arm. So like if I have just my heel, I might not feel as big of a stretch versus if I get more of my leg on there and just allow the weight of my right leg to pull my left leg into a really good internal rotation stretch. And so now I would hold a second 2 minutes, just like this. So my first set, 4.5 minutes worth of work. I can do this laying down. Last night I was watching The Men Who Shaped America on History Channel, and I'm just hanging out on the couch doing really good internal rotation work while I'm Netflixing. And then I can hit a second round of PAILs, so I would push again, and then rails, driving farther down, etc., etc., etc. Then when I come out of here, I can train my internal rotation. I can check it. So like that feels way better, and it's actually moving more into internal rotation before I start to try to do this kind of stuff. So now this hip feels really good. So what I've been doing is I've been really focusing on internal rotation for the hip, external rotation for the hip on days when I train jiu-jitsu, and it's having a immediate impact on my ability to move my legs and how much degree of motion I have in my hips. If my hips can only move so far, I'm very limited with what I can do offensively or defensively, versus if I systematically break down my body joint by joint and then improve each of those joints on their own, the whole unit works better. And so I have a lot more degree of movement when I train jiu-jitsu. So give this a try. If you have trouble with this 90-90 position and you find yourself just feeling a lot in the low back, and if you're just feeling that pinch in the front, okay?